Welcome to Roots and Reckonings, where we explore topics that can be difficult to navigate but important to understand. Today, we're taking a look at 100 days of killings in Rwanda. If we speak the same language, share the same culture, live in the same country, how do we become so profoundly different?
It's a heavy question.
It really is.
We are going to explore the critical, often overlooked colonial roots of that horrific 1994 genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda.
Right.
Our mission really is to understand how these outside powers systematically reshaped Rwanda's social fabric, its identities, and how that set the stage for just unimaginable tragedy. Yeah, trying to unpack the factors that led to such an immense loss of life.
And just as importantly, how Rwanda is grappling with this complex legacy now 30 years later.
So just for context, let's quickly recap. April 1994, the government at the time mobilized the Hutu population to massacre their Tutsi neighbors.
The scale is staggering. An estimated 800,000 people murdered in just 100 days.
And before this, Rwandan society was generally understood as having three main groups: Hutu, Tutsi, and Twa.
Okay, so that's the setup. Let's start by tracing identity, because our research really shows that before colonialism, identity in Rwanda was, well, remarkably fluid.
That's right. Terms like Hutu, Tutsi, Twa, they definitely existed, often reflected social or economic goals, maybe status.
Not these rigid ethnic lines we think of now.
Exactly. It was a much more dynamic system. What's genuinely fascinating here is that a wealthy Hutu, for example, could actually become sort of an honorary Tutsi.
Wow.
Yeah, historical accounts show Rwandans shared a common language, Kinyarwanda, a common culture, even clan names that cut across these group lines, was far from the fixed, unchangeable divisions that came later.
That distinction is so crucial. I mean, the pre-colonial royal court in Nyanza, it offers a great illustration.
And absolutely, they had these sacred cows, Inyambo cattle.
Symbols of prestige, beauty.
Exactly, not primarily for meat or milk. Not a commodity in that sense. One source really highlights this, and it speaks volumes about a shared cultural value system that, went beyond these later categories.
But this fluidity started to unravel. Enter German colonization.
Yes. Gustav Adolf von Gutzen arrived in 1894, and by 1897, Rwanda becomes part of the German colonial empire. And the Germans brought with them this pretty insidious 19th century European idea of a racial hierarchy.
And this is where the manipulation of identity gets really disturbing. They started classifying the Tutsi as Hamites.
Right, this pseudoscientific concept of an in-between race, supposedly closer to white Europeans, therefore more advanced.
And they claimed this group migrated from the north and dominated the supposedly indigenous quote-unquote Bantu Hutu.
It was a completely foreign concept, introduced by European researchers and then weaponized, really, for colonial control. You even see it explicitly in the writings of a German physician, Richard Kant, back in 1899.
What did he say?
He chillingly expressed hope, and this is basically a quote, to destroy the power of the Watutsi. So it wasn't just some abstract theory, it was an active colonial aim.
And this scientific racism, it wasn't just in books. They actually put it into practice, didn't they? Collecting human remains.
Yeah, it's horrifying. Around 900 human skulls were stolen from Rwanda by an anthropologist, Jan Ciechanowski actually, kept in Germany.
Used to prove these distinct ethnicities existed. It's just dehumanizing.
Completely. And almost worse in a way, they made plaster face masks of living Rwandans.
As material evidence.
These are apparently hidden in a Berlin depot now to prove the existence of different races. As one source puts it, it's this frightening creation of stereotypes with just a few brushstrokes, solidifying a false narrative.
Then the Belgians took over from the Germans in 1916. Did things change? Or did they just continue this?
They absolutely ramped it up. The Belgians systematically reinforced and extended these racial categories. The pivotal moment, a really devastating one, came in 1932.
What happened then?
They introduced compulsory identity cards. And on these cards, every single individual was permanently labeled Tutsi, Hutu, or Twa.
Wow, so no more fluidity.
None. That policy cemented the racial division. It made it impossible to move between groups. Those previously somewhat fluid socioeconomic categories became rigid, unchangeable, state-mandated ethnic identities.
It's just such a stark example of how identity can be manipulated, weaponized by an outside power.
Precisely. And this feeds directly into the next stage, the seeds of genocide.
Right, because after World War II, things started shifting again.
Yeah, you see the rise of a Hutu emancipation movement. Now, this was fueled by resentment, partly cultivated by those colonial policies favoring the Tutsi elite initially.
And supported by the Catholic Church.
Yes, the church saw itself as kind of empowering the perceived underprivileged Hutu majority. This led to a sizable Hutu elite emerging.
And this all culminated in the 1959 Hutu Revolution.
Right. With tacit Belgian approval, maybe even encouragement, there were widespread Hutu attacks on Tutsi. The Tutsi monarchy was overthrown in 1961.
And by independence in 1962, Rwanda was a Hutu-dominated republic.
The consequence.
When Rwanda gained independence in 1962, a Hutu-dominated republic was established, excluding the Tutsi from political and military power. This new Hutu administration then propagated an ideology known as Hutu power, which blamed the Tutsi minority for all of Rwanda's problems and viewed them as foreigners and enemies.
Thousands upon thousands of Tutsi were forced to flee. They became refugees in neighboring countries for the next 30 years.
And their exclusion didn't stop there, did it?
No, successive post-independence governments, especially under President Juvénal Habyarimana, continued to exclude Tutsi from real political power, from the military, education, public service.
And critically denied them the right to return home.
Exactly.
The stage was tragically set for the genocide. But the violence did not erupt overnight. It was preceded by years of simmering conflict and escalating hate. In 1990, a group of Tutsi refugees, many of whom had fought in Uganda's army, formed the Rwandan Patriotic Front, or RPF. Led by Paul Kagame, their aim was to overthrow the Hutu government and secure the right for exiled Tutsis to return home. This sparked the Rwandan Civil War, which lasted 3 years.
Fighting explicitly for the right of those refugees to return.
Meanwhile, inside Rwanda, this Hutu power ideology was growing.
Significantly, this extremist movement actively plotted against President Habyarimana, mainly because he was engaging in peace talks with the RPF.
An attempted peace in August 1993 saw the signing of the Arusha Accords, which aimed to end the civil war and integrate the RPF into a transitional government. The United Nations Assistance Mission for Rwanda, or UNAMIR, was deployed to supervise this peace. However, Hutu extremists within the government were vehemently opposed to sharing power.
They even carried out localized killings of Tutsi.
And they had this incredibly powerful propaganda tool, Radio Machete.
RTLM. This popular station just broadcast relentless, intense anti-Tutsi hate.
Calling them Inyenzi.
Cockroaches, pests, explicitly calling for their extermination. There's one broadcast quote that's just bone-chilling. Someone must make them disappear for good, to wipe them from human memory, to exterminate the Tutsi from the surface of the earth.
Just openly inciting genocide on the radio.
Yes, effectively indoctrinating and mobilizing ordinary Hutu to kill their neighbors, friends, even family members.
As early as January 1994, UNAMIR Force Commander Romeo Delia was sending urgent warnings, including his infamous genocide fax to UN headquarters in New York. He had intelligence that the Hutu government was training militias and planning to kill 1,000 Tutsis every 20 minutes. Yet the international community refused to take action, stating that all humans were not being treated equally and dismissing the conflict as mere tribalism in Africa. They couldn't even provide the 450 troops Delia requested, let alone the 67,000 deployed in Yugoslavia. This inaction by global leaders in the face of clear warnings is a significant stain on the international community's conscience. Then came the catalyst, April 6, 1994.
President Habyarimana's plane was shot down over Kigali. We still don't definitively know who was responsible, but it doesn't really matter in terms of the immediate consequence.
Because Hutu extremists seized power almost instantly.
Immediately. In the chaos, they took control. And they moved with brutal speed and efficiency.
Distributing lists
of people to be killed Tutsi and moderate Hutu opposition figures, roadblocks sprang up everywhere.
Using those identity cards.
Using those Belgian-issued identity cards with the ethnic labels to identify Tutsi.
And Tutsis were immediately killed.
House-to-house searches began. People were hunted down and killed, often with machetes, clubs. The very tool of colonial administration became an instrument of mass murder.
A crucial instrument in fueling the genocide was Radio Television Libre des Mille Collines, widely known as Radio Machete. This Hutu extremist radio station broadcast relentless hate propaganda, urging people to weed out the cockroaches, referring to Tutsis. They named targets and even incited listeners on where to find them. The propaganda dehumanized Tutsis, portraying them as non-human pests that needed to be exterminated. This had a profound effect, turning neighbors against neighbors, and even husbands against Tutsi wives. The horror of what unfolded is, almost impossible to truly grasp.
And we also hear from a survivor from Kabgayi who was just 11 when it started.
He remembers his father being taken from a church school.
Yes, where over 50,000 Tutsi had sought refuge thinking they'd be safe. His last memory is his father waving goodbye before being taken away to be killed. He also mentioned some victims were burned alive.
It's just deliberate, calculated cruelty on a mass scale.
And the world.
The colonial legacy not only caused the division, but also prolonged the genocide through the inaction of former colonial powers and the international community. UNAMIR's mandate, despite General Delaire's desperate pleas, explicitly forbade intervention to stop the killings, limiting them to self-defense. When 10 Belgian peacekeepers protecting moderate Hutu Prime Minister Agatha Uwilingiyama were brutally murdered on April 7th, Belgium, a major troop contributor, withdrew its forces. Most UN peacekeepers followed suit, leaving the Rwandan civilian population defenseless. France, a longtime ally of the Hutu government, launched Operation Turquoise in late June 1994, ostensibly a humanitarian mission. However, many perceived it as an effort to protect Hutus from the advancing RPF, including some who had participated in the genocide. France was accused of knowing about the preparations for the genocide and helping to train Hutu militiamen. A 2021 Rwandan government-commissioned study concluded that France did nothing to prevent the foreseeable massacres. In Human Rights Watch archives, they just painfully show this in action. Repeated warnings from human rights defenders on the ground.
About the impending slaughter, the planning.
And international leaders refused to call it genocide, refused to acknowledge what was happening. Crucially, they failed to act. For a long time, the UN avoided using the word genocide due to pressure from the US, further delaying any meaningful intervention. New UNAMIR soldiers, authorized in May, did not arrive until June, by which time most of the killings had already occurred. The RPF, under Paul Kagame, resumed its military offensive in response to the genocide. They slowly but steadily gained territory, ending the killings in areas they occupied. On July 4, 1994, the RPF seized control of Kigali, and by July 18th, they had taken Gisenyi and the rest of the Northwest, effectively ending the genocide. In just 100 days, an estimated 800,000 people were slaughtered, primarily Tutsi, along with moderate Hutus and Twa. The majority were killed with rudimentary weapons like machetes, often by their own neighbors, making the violence deeply intimate and personal. Sexual violence was systematic and widespread, with estimates ranging from 250,000 to 500,000 women raped, often with the intent to infect them with HIV or destroy their reproductive capacities. Bill Clinton later expressed regret, didn't he, to the U.S. failure to intervene.
Deep regret, citing fears of repeating the Somalia debacle from the year before. One report even indicated that 80% of the discussion in Washington during those crucial first days was about evacuating American citizens, not the genocide itself. However, and this is crucial for understanding the full picture, we have to acknowledge the complexities that followed.
You mean actions by the RPF?
Yes. There were documented killings of thousands of Hutu civilians by RPF troops in the period immediately after they took control. Alison DeForgia, a highly respected researcher.
Right, from Human Rights Watch.
She estimated around 30,000 Hutu deaths in that period. And there was also a suppressed UN report, the Grusony report, detailing systematic murders of Hutu by the RPF.
So it wasn't a simple good guys defeat bad guys ending.
No, it really highlights the incredibly difficult truths and questions of accountability that emerge in the aftermath of such widespread violence.
The devastation left behind must have been immense. Infrastructure, economies shattered.
Absolutely. Over 40% of the population either killed or displaced. The judicial system was completely overwhelmed. I mean, how do you possibly prosecute hundreds of thousands of potential perpetrators?
So, how did Rwanda even begin to seek justice and rebuild?
Well, they implemented a really unique system alongside the formal courts, the community-based Gakaka court.
Gakaka, like traditional justice.
Adapted traditional justice, yeah. From 2002 to 2012, these courts, run by elected lay judges, processed nearly 2 million cases. While praised for their efficiency and community participation, they also faced criticism regarding fair trial concerns and accusations of not addressing RPF crimes. The aim was to speed up trials for lower-level participants and foster reconciliation at the local village level. People confronting each other, confessing, seeking forgiveness.
And for the higher level perpetrators.
There was the International Criminal Tribunal for Rwanda, the ICTR, set up by the UN in Arusha, Tanzania. The ICTR focused on prosecuting high-level orchestrators of the genocide, including government and military officials. It indicted 93 individuals and convicted 62, notably being the first tribunal to conceptualize rape as a method of genocide. So a dual approach, grassroots and international. The country also has reconciliation villages where victims and perpetrators live side by side, such as in Mayaga. One survivor, Solange, whose aunt's family was killed by a perpetrator, is now married to the perpetrator's son. This demonstrates an astonishing, albeit difficult, path to reconciliation. As one survivor noted, forgiveness, though not easy, is crucial to avoid prolonging the pain and carrying the luggage of anger.
But beyond the legal side, what about the human cost? The trauma?
Oh, absolutely central. The enduring impact of trauma is a critical part of Rwanda's legacy today. It's striking. Some scientific studies have even found epigenetic changes, marks in the DNA of survivors and their children linked to the trauma.
Wow. Like a physical inheritance of that historical pain.
It seems so. The legacy of the genocide continues to affect Rwanda deeply. The trauma is real and intergenerational, impacting those born long after 1994. Survivors grapple with immense loss, the haunting memories of violence, and the challenge of living without their role models. There's a cultural tendency to keep emotions internalized, making open expression of grief difficult.
That's a really difficult balance.
Immense, especially confronting the horror of, face-to-face killings with machetes. It highlights the profound challenge of healing, the delicate path that survivors have to walk.
Yet, despite that immense pain, there seems to be this powerful current of, forgiveness and reconciliation trying to unfold.
There really is.
We also hear about the specific challenges for people of mixed Hutu and Tutsi heritage, like Fistula.
Yeah, he talks about feeling caught in the middle, struggling with this sense of shame, finding it hard to share his story because both identities were part of him. It just underscores how deeply these artificial divisions permeated everything.
And the government has made a conscious effort to counter this, right? Removing ethnicity from ID cards.
A huge step, removing those classifications from the national identity cards, and actively teaching younger generations born after 1994 that we are all Rwandans. It's a deliberate attempt to undo that colonial legacy of division, to forge a new national identity.
This effort to shape a new future feels really tangible.
Yeah, it's deeply symbolic, isn't it? Reclaiming roots, continuity, building something new on the ruins of the past.
Despite everything, life is possible 30 years on.
It's about understanding who they were before history was twisted, before identities were weaponized.
And using that knowledge, that truth, to shape a new society where people have, as they say, the right to live a good life.
As you reflect on Rwanda's powerful story of resilience and how an entire nation is actively trying to reclaim its identity from these imposed narratives, maybe think about this.
What does it tell us about the enduring power of historical truth? And maybe our collective responsibility, globally and personally, to confront difficult pasts.
Yeah, confronting them honestly to build a truly unified future, maybe learning from Rwanda's journey.
It's a journey that, for many, is far from over, but one that continues to strive for a future where never again is not just a slogan, but a lived reality.
So if we sort of pull back and synthesize, we've talked about this dual justice approach, the international ICTR focusing on leaders, the community-based Gakaka tackling the vast majority.
Right. Unprecedented steps, really.
Then the really bold policy steps towards unity, removing ethnic IDs, teaching shared identity, the reconciliation villages,
Exactly.
but also the persistent challenges that deep intergenerational trauma and the ongoing navigation between preventing hate speech and allowing open discussion about history.
Rwanda's journey offers so many lessons, doesn't it? Stark reminders about dehumanization, the terrifying power of propaganda, the importance of international action or sometimes inaction.
It really is a powerful, if complex, testament to resilience, isn't it? The sheer hard work of healing and maybe the capacity for forgiveness and hope, even in the darkest circumstances.
Absolutely. And, for many in Rwanda, that journey is far from over. They're still actively working towards a future where never again isn't just a slogan, but a daily reality.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a really profound thought to reflect on, doesn't it?
I think so. What does it genuinely mean for a whole society to forge new identity when its past has been so tragically manipulated? And maybe more broadly, how can the world learn from Rwanda's path to help ensure that people everywhere have that fundamental right to live a good life, moving forward with understanding after conflict and atrocity? You've been listening to Roots and Reckonings.